The moment Clara Preston realized her brother and his wife had abandoned her at the dusty Moab station in the Utah Territory, with nothing but the traveling dress on her back and an empty coin purse. The world tilted sideways in a way that had nothing to do with the blazing August sun of 1878. She stood on the weathered platform, watching the wagon that had carried her all the way from St. Louis disappear around the bend, leaving nothing but a cloud of red dust hanging in the still air. The station master had just informed her that the train ticket her brother Thomas promised to purchase was nowhere to be found, and the eastbound train would arrive in less than an hour. Clara's hands trembled as she clutched her small carpetbag, the only possession they had allowed her to keep. "Miss, you cannot remain on the platform without a valid ticket," the station master said, not unkindly but firmly. His weathered face showed sympathy, but rules were rules in this harsh land. "I understand," Clara managed, though her throat felt tight. "I just need a moment to think." But what was there to think about? Thomas had made it perfectly clear during the journey that she was no longer welcome in their home. His new wife, Margaret, had made certain of that. They had brought Clara west under the pretense of a fresh start, only to leave her stranded in this remote Utah town with nothing. At 22 years old, Clara found herself more alone than she had ever been, even after their parents died 3 years prior. She moved to the edge of the platform, sitting on a wooden bench in the shade of the station's overhang. The main street of Moab stretched before her, a collection of rough-hewn buildings that spoke of frontier determination. The town was small, barely more than a few dozen structures, but it was alive with the energy of settlers, ranchers, and traders moving through the territory. Clara tried to formulate a plan. She had no money, no ticket, and no prospects. The knowledge of arithmetic and literature that had made her useful as a schoolteacher back in Missouri seemed worthless here. She could seek employment, but the eastbound train was her only real chance to return to civilization, to find work in Denver or perhaps even make it back to St. Louis, where she had friends who might help her. The sound of spurs on wood made her look up. A man approached the ticket window, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin, and the easy, confident walk of someone completely at home in this rugged landscape. He wore dusty denim pants, a dark brown shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. A bandana hung loosely around his neck, and she noticed his boots were worn but well-maintained. "One ticket to Denver, please," his voice carried across the platform, deep and steady. "That will be $8, Mr. Vaughn," the station master replied. The man counted out the money without hesitation. Clara found herself watching him, not because she meant to stare, but because there was something capable about him, something that suggested he knew exactly who he was and where he belonged in the world. It was a quality she envied in that moment. He turned from the window, ticket in hand, and his eyes met hers. They were a striking hazel color, green and brown mixing together like the earth after rain. For a moment neither of them looked away. Then Clara, embarrassed to be caught staring, dropped her gaze to her hands. But he walked toward her instead of away. His boots stopped right in front of the bench. "Waiting for the eastbound train?" he asked. Clara looked up, squinting slightly against the sun behind him. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, with a strong jaw and a face that was honest rather than handsome, though not unattractive. "I was supposed to be," she heard herself say. "Supposed to be." He tilted his head slightly. And then, perhaps because she had no one else to tell, perhaps because the concern in his voice seemed genuine, or perhaps because she was simply at the end of her resources, Clara told him everything. The words tumbled out about Thomas and Margaret, about the promised ticket that never materialized, about being brought west only to be abandoned. The man listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was thinking through something complicated. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Clara Preston." "Miss Preston, my name is Nathan Vaughn. I own a ranch about 15 miles north of here." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "What your brother did is not right. It is not decent, and it is not what any man should do to his own kin." "No," Clara agreed quietly, "but it is done nonetheless." Nathan looked down at the ticket in his hand, then back at her. She watched as he came to some internal decision, his expression settling into determination. "I cannot let you be stranded here with no means and no help," he said. "That ticket I just bought, it is yours now." Clara's eyes widened. "What? No, I cannot accept that. You need it yourself." "I was going to Denver to look at some breeding stock, but it can wait. Truth is, I have been putting off that trip for weeks anyway. You, on the other hand, need that train today." He held out the ticket. "But that is $8, Clara protested, even as hope sparked in her chest. "I have no way to repay you. I am not asking for repayment." "Then why would you do this for a complete stranger?" Nathan met her eyes steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because you need help and I am able to give it. That seems reason enough to me." Clara stared at him, this unexpected cowboy who was offering her salvation without asking for anything in return. In her experience, such generosity always came with strings attached. Thomas had been generous too, before Margaret came along, and look where that had led. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say you will take the ticket and get yourself somewhere safe, somewhere you can make a new start." He placed the ticket on the bench beside her. When she did not immediately reach for it, the train whistle sounded in the distance. Clara looked at the ticket, then at Nathan Vaughn's earnest face, and made a decision that surprised herself. "No," she said. Nathan's eyebrows rose. "No, I mean yes, thank you for your incredible kindness, but no, I will not take your ticket without some way to repay you." Clara stood, squaring her shoulders. "You said you own a ranch. You must need workers. I can cook, clean, keep accounts. I was a school teacher back in Missouri. I can read, write, and cipher. Surely there is some work I could do to earn that $8. Nathan looked taken aback. "Miss Preston, I was not suggesting you owe me labor. This is a gift. And it is a generous one, but I will not take charity. If you want to help me, give me work. Let me earn my passage." Clara surprised herself with her own vehemence, but something about accepting his money without earning it felt wrong. She had been made dependent on Thomas's charity, and look where that had left her. Nathan studied her for a long moment, and Clara got the sense he was reassessing her, seeing something in her declaration that he had not expected. "My housekeeper left 2 months ago to care for her sick daughter in California," he said slowly. "I have been managing on my own, but I will admit the house is not in the best condition, and I am surviving on burnt bacon and overcooked beans. If you are serious about working, I could use someone to manage the household. But Miss Preston, $8 would be earned in 2 weeks at most." "That is hardly worth." "Then I will work for a month," Clara interrupted. "That seems fairer compensation for such generosity. A month gives me time to earn the ticket money and save a little for when I move on. If that is acceptable to you, Mr. Vaughn." The train whistle sounded again, closer now. Nathan glanced toward the tracks, then back at Clara. "Are you certain about this? Denver might offer you more opportunities." "Denver might offer me nothing at all. At least this way, I know I will have a place to stay and work to do." Clara picked up the ticket and held it out to him. "Please, let me do this my own way." Something that might have been respect flickered in Nathan's eyes. He took the ticket back and walked to the window. "I need to exchange this for a refund," he told the station master. Clara waited, her heart pounding. Part of her wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. She knew nothing about this man except that he had been willing to help her. But the alternative was staying on this platform with no money, no prospects, and nowhere to go. At least Nathan Vaughn's offer gave her options. He returned with his money, folding it back into his pocket. "I have a few supplies to pick up, and then we can head to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride by wagon. I am ready whenever you are, Mr. Vaughn. If we are going to be sharing a house, even with propriety observed, you should probably call me Nathan." He picked up her carpet bag before she could protest. "And I will call you Miss Preston unless you say otherwise." "Clara is fine," she said, following him down the platform steps. They walked down Moab's main street, and Clara took in the town properly for the first time. There was a general store, a saloon, a small church, and various other establishments that served the ranchers and settlers in the area. People moved about their business with the purposeful energy of those who worked hard for their survival. Nathan's wagon was hitched outside the general store, a sturdy vehicle pulled by two well-kept horses. He helped Clara onto the seat, his hand firm and respectful as he steadied her, then went into the store. Through the window, she watched him talk with the shopkeeper, pointing to various items. He emerged 15 minutes later with a crate of supplies that he loaded into the back. "All set," he said, climbing up beside her. He took up the reins with practiced ease. As they rolled out of Moab, Clara snuck glances at her unexpected employer. His profile was strong, and there was a steadiness to him that inspired confidence. But she knew better than to trust first impressions. She would reserve judgment and focus on the work ahead. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to fill the silence. Nathan seemed to relax slightly at the question. "I have about 200 acres along the Colorado River. It is good grazing land when the weather cooperates, which it does not always do out here. I run about 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses. It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but it is mine, paid for free and clear." "That must have taken considerable work," Clara observed. "It did. I came out here 5 years ago with money I had saved working as a ranch hand in Texas. Bought the land cheap because the previous owner could not make it work. Spent the first 2 years barely scraping by, but the last 3 have been better. The cattle market is strong and I have been able to expand slowly. You have any other workers?" "I have 2 ranch hands, Miguel and his son Tomas. They live in a cabin about a quarter-mile from the main house. Good men, hard workers. Miguel has been with me for 3 years now." Nathan guided the horses around a rocky outcropping. "The house itself is nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a main room with the kitchen and a sitting area and a small room I use as an office. You would have one of the bedrooms. I will take the other. There is a lock on your door." He said the last part matter-of-factly, but Clara appreciated him addressing the elephant between them. A young, unmarried woman living in a house with a single man was not proper by any standard, but propriety seemed like a luxury she could no longer afford. "I appreciate your consideration of my concerns," Clara said carefully. "Miss Preston, Clara, I want to be clear about something." Nathan kept his eyes on the trail, but his voice was serious. "I am offering you employment, nothing more. You will be safe in my home. You have my word on that." "Thank you," Clara said, and found that she believed him. The landscape around them was unlike anything Clara had seen back east. Red rock formations rose from the earth like ancient sculptures, and the Colorado River wound through the valley below, a ribbon of life in the arid land. Mountains loomed in the distance, purple and imposing. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. "You miss Texas?" Clara asked. Nathan considered the question. "Sometimes, but this land suits me better. It is quieter here, less crowded." A man can make something of himself if he is willing to work for it. That seems to be the promise of the West. For some. For others, it is just different troubles than they had back east. Nathan glanced at her. What about you? What will you do after your month is up? I suppose I will go to Denver and look for a teaching position. Or perhaps I will find work elsewhere. I have not thought that far ahead yet. Clara watched the landscape roll by. This morning I thought I was going home to St. Louis. Now I am heading to a ranch in Utah Territory. Life changes quickly sometimes. It does, Nathan agreed. But sometimes those quick changes lead to better places than where we were headed. They fell into a comfortable silence. Clara found herself studying Nathan when she thought he was not looking. There was something solid about him, something reliable. She had learned not to trust easily, but there was an honesty in the way he spoke, in the way he had helped her without expecting anything improper in return. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. The house was built of wood and stone, sitting on a slight elevation that gave it a view of the surrounding land. It was modest but well-maintained, with a covered porch across the front. To the left was a barn and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see horses in a corral near the barn. "Home," Nathan said simply. He pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, then came around to help Clara. His hand circled her waist briefly as he lifted her down, and Clara felt a flutter of something she chose not to examine too closely. It had been a very long day, and her emotions were unreliable. Inside, the house was exactly as Nathan had described, functional but neglected. Dust covered most surfaces, dishes were piled in a basin, and Clara could see where bachelor living had taken its toll. But the structure was sound, the furniture sturdy if plain, and there was a large stone fireplace that would provide good heat in winter. "Your room is this way," Nathan said, leading her to one of the two doors off the main room. The bedroom was small but clean enough, with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a small window that looked out toward the mountains. Clara set her carpetbag on the bed. "I know it is not much," Nathan began, but Clara shook her head. "It is perfect, thank you." He showed her the rest of the house, pointing out where things were kept, explaining the water situation and the root cellar. Clara took mental notes, already planning how she would organize and clean once she had the chance. "I imagine you are hungry," Nathan said. "I can attempt to cook something, though I warn you, my skills are limited." "Why do not you let me earn my keep starting now?" Clara suggested. "Show me where the kitchen supplies are, and I will make a supper." Nathan looked relieved. "That would be very welcome. I will bring in the supplies from the wagon and tend to the horses." Clara explored the kitchen area, finding flour, cornmeal, some potatoes, dried beans, salt pork, and various preserved goods. Not an inspiring selection, but she could work with it. She found an apron hanging on a peg and tied it on, then set to work. As she prepared a simple meal of fried potatoes and salt pork with cornbread, Clara felt some of the day's tension ease from her shoulders. Cooking was familiar, comforting. She could hear Nathan outside, unhitching the horses and moving supplies. The domesticity of the moment struck her. How odd that this morning she had been in a wagon with her brother, and now she was cooking supper in a stranger's kitchen. But Nathan did not feel entirely like a stranger anymore. Perhaps it was because he had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Perhaps it was because he had been straightforward and honest in all their interactions. Whatever the reason, Clara felt more at ease than she had any right to feel. Nathan returned just as she was pulling the cornbread from the oven. His eyes widened. "That smells better than anything that has been cooked in this house in 2 months," he said. "It is nothing fancy," Clara warned, plating the food. They sat at the rough-hewn table, and Nathan offered a simple grace before they ate. The food was indeed basic, but it was hot and well prepared, and Nathan ate with obvious appreciation. "This is excellent," he said after a few bites. "If this is your idea of nothing fancy, I cannot wait to see what you can do with better ingredients." "I will need to see what is available in town and what you can afford to purchase," Clara said. "I could also start a kitchen garden if there is time and suitable ground. There is a plot on the east side of the house that used to be a garden. The previous housekeeper maintained it. You are welcome to use it." They continued eating, and Clara found the silence between them peaceful rather than awkward. When they finished, she cleared the dishes and heated water to wash them while Nathan sat at the table, working on some ledgers he had retrieved from his office. "You said you can keep accounts," he commented, looking up from the books. "Do you have experience with ranch finances?" "Not specifically, but I kept books for my father's dry goods store before he died. I understand profit and loss, inventory management, that sort of thing." "Would you be willing to look at these? I am adequate with numbers, but I am certain I am not doing it the most efficient way." Clara dried her hands and came to look over his shoulder. The books were neat enough but disorganized, with expenses and income jumbled together without clear categories. She could see immediately how to improve the system. "I could reorganize this for you," she said. "Create separate columns for different types of expenses, track inventory more precisely. It would give you a clearer picture of where your money is going and coming from." Nathan looked up at her and she realized how close she was standing. She stepped back slightly. "That would be incredibly helpful," he said. "Consider it part of your duties if you are willing." "I am willing." Clara returned to the dishes, her heart beating a bit faster than it should. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the small room that was now hers, Clara thought about the strange turn her life had taken. This morning she had been full of dread about returning to St. Louis destitute and alone. Now she had a roof over her head, work to do, and an employer who seemed genuinely kind. She thought about Nathan Vaughn, about the way he had helped her without hesitation, the way he treated her with respect, the way he moved through the world with quiet confidence. She warned herself not to read too much into his kindness. He was simply a decent man who had done the right thing. In a month, she would move on, and he would be nothing more than a memory of a difficult time. But as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself hoping that the month would not pass too quickly. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings, and then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She dressed quickly in the same traveling dress she had been wearing, making a mental note that she would need to acquire or make new clothes soon. When she emerged from her room, Nathan was already up, dressed in work clothes and pulling on his boots by the door. "Morning," he said. "I did not want to wake you. I am heading out to check the cattle in the north pasture. Will you be all right here?" "Of course. I plan to spend today getting this house in order. Help yourself to anything you need. I will be back by midday." He paused at the door. "Clara, I am glad you are here." Then he was gone, leaving Clara with a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She spent the morning in a flurry of activity. She swept and dusted every surface, scrubbed the floors, organized the kitchen, and washed all the linen she could find. The physical work was satisfying, and slowly the house began to transform from a bachelor's neglected dwelling into something that felt more like a home. At midday, Nathan returned with Miguel and Tomás. Miguel was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a quick smile. Tomás was perhaps 18, quiet but hardworking. Nathan introduced them, and both men greeted Clara with polite respect. We usually eat lunch out here when we are working close to the house, Nathan explained. But with the weather so hot, we thought to come inside today. Of course, Clara said. She had made extra food anticipating he might bring the ranch hands, and she quickly set out plates of beans, cornbread, and the remaining salt pork. The men ate gratefully, complimenting the food. After they finished and returned to work, Clara tackled Nathan's office. The space was chaotic, with papers stacked haphazardly and receipts stuffed into drawers. She spent the afternoon organizing everything, creating a filing system that made sense, and beginning to reorganize the account books. When Nathan came in that evening, tired and dusty from a day's work, he stopped short at the sight of the house. "This is remarkable," he said, looking around. Everything was clean, organized, and orderly. "You have done more in one day than I could have managed in a month." "It needed doing," Clara said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I started on your office as well. I hope you do not mind. I am grateful." Nathan looked at her with open admiration. "You are not exaggerating about your skills." Over supper that night, a proper meal of stewed chicken Clara had found preserved in the root cellar. Served with biscuits and canned vegetables, they talked more easily than before. Nathan told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand, about the challenges of ranching in the territory. Clara found herself genuinely interested, asking questions and offering observations. "You have a good head for business," Nathan said. "The questions you are asking are the right ones. I enjoyed working in my father's store. There is something satisfying about making an enterprise run efficiently." "Do you miss him?" "Your father," Clara was quiet for a moment. "Every day. He was a good man, patient and kind. When he and my mother died of the fever, Thomas was all I had left. I thought family meant something to him, but I was wrong." "He is a fool," Nathan said bluntly. "Any man who would abandon his sister like that is not worth the name." The fierce protectiveness in his voice surprised Clara. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are hardworking, capable, and proud enough to want to earn your own way instead of accepting charity. I know you have been treated poorly by someone who should have cared for you. That is enough for me to know your brother is a fool." Clara felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She had not cried when Thomas left her at the station, had not let herself feel the full weight of the betrayal. But Nathan's words, his clear anger on her behalf, cracked something in her defenses. "Thank you," she managed. Nathan reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand. The touch was brief and respectful, but it sent warmth flooding through Clara's entire body. "You are safe here," he said simply, "for as long as you want to stay." The days began to develop a rhythm. Clara would wake early and prepare breakfast for Nathan and the ranch hands. After they headed out to work, she would tackle housework, gradually transforming the neglected house into an organized, comfortable home. She reorganized the kitchen, making it more efficient. She mended clothes, cleaned every corner, and began planning the garden she would plant. In the afternoons, she worked on Nathan's accounts, creating detailed records and catching several errors that had cost him money. She also began making notes on inventory, tracking supplies and anticipating needs. Nathan, for his part, treated her with unfailing respect and courtesy. He was generous in his praise of her work, but never presumptuous. He kept appropriate distance, but engaged her in conversation during meals, clearly valuing her opinions. Clara found herself looking forward to their evening talks, to the way his face lit up when discussing his plans for the ranch, to the rumble of his laugh when she said something that amused him. A week into her employment, Nathan announced they needed to go to Moab for supplies. "I need to pick up some things at the general store, and I thought you might want to select what you need for the house and garden," he said. "Also, You will need more clothes than what you have." Clara looked down at her dress, which she had been washing every few days. "I cannot afford new clothes yet. Consider it an advance on your wages. You cannot work properly without adequate clothing." "Nathan, you have already spent $8 on my train ticket. I will not have you spending more." "The $8 for the ticket is long forgotten. This is different. You need clothes to do your job. Let me provide them as part of your employment." They argued about it, but Nathan was stubborn, and ultimately Clara had to concede he had a point. She could not continue wearing one dress indefinitely. The trip to Moab was pleasant. Nathan drove the wagon, and they talked easily as they traveled. Clara found herself noticing small things about him: the way his hands were confident on the reins, the way he tipped his hat to anyone they passed on the road, the way he seemed to know every rock and curve of the landscape. In town, Nathan proved to be well liked. People greeted him warmly, and several asked about his new housekeeper with barely concealed curiosity. Nathan introduced Clara simply and honestly, explaining she was managing his household. If anyone thought it improper, they kept it to themselves, though Clara caught a few speculative glances. At the general store, Nathan insisted Clara select fabric for new dresses. She chose practical calico and sturdy cotton, enough for 2 work dresses. She also selected seeds for the garden: tomatoes, beans, squash, lettuce, and herbs. While Nathan conducted his business, Clara wandered the store, fascinated by the mix of goods available even in this remote location. She was examining a display of books when a woman approached her. "You must be Miss Preston," the woman said. She was perhaps 40, with a kind face and intelligent eyes. "I am Catherine Wells. My husband owns the store. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Wells. I heard you are working for Nathan Vaughn. He is a good man, one of the best in the territory." "You are fortunate to have found such an employer." "I am," Clara agreed, then added impulsively, "He is also very fortunate to have found someone willing to organize that disaster of a house." Mrs. Wells laughed. "I imagine he is. We have all worried about him, living out there alone after his housekeeper left. It is good to know he has proper help now." They talked for a few more minutes, and Clara found herself liking Mrs. Wells. The older woman invited her to a ladies' social the following week, and Clara accepted, pleased at the prospect of female companionship. On the ride back to the ranch, Clara mentioned the invitation to Nathan. "You should go," he said immediately. "Miguel can drive you. It will be good for you to have friends here." "I will only be here for a month," Clara reminded him, though she was not sure if she was reminding him or herself. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "You could stay longer if you wanted. The position is yours for as long as you wish it." Clara's heart beat faster. "I thought this was temporary." "It was, but you have made yourself invaluable in just a week. The house runs better, the accounts make sense, and I actually enjoy coming home in the evenings instead of dreading facing that chaos." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "I would be a fool not to try to convince you to stay. The question is whether you want to stay." "I do not know what I want," Clara admitted. "A month ago I thought I knew exactly what my life was. Now everything has changed." "Then do not decide yet. Take your time, see how you feel." But Clara was starting to realize that her feelings were becoming complicated. She enjoyed her work, enjoyed the rhythm of life on the ranch, enjoyed the stark beauty of the landscape. But more than any of that, she enjoyed Nathan's company. She looked forward to their conversations, treasured the moments of laughter they shared, found herself watching for him to return each evening. It was dangerous territory, she knew. Nathan was her employer, and she was dependent on him for shelter and livelihood. Any romantic feelings would be foolish and inappropriate. Yet she could not help the way her heart lifted when he smiled at her, or the way she felt safe in his presence. 2 weeks into her stay, a thunderstorm rolled through the valley. Clara had never experienced a storm like it. The sky turned black, lightning split the heavens, and rain fell in sheets so thick she could barely see the barn from the house. The thunder was deafening. Nathan had been out checking the cattle when the storm hit. Clara stood at the window, watching anxiously for any sign of him. An hour passed, then 2. Her worry grew with each passing minute. When the door finally burst open and Nathan staggered in, soaked to the skin and exhausted, Clara felt such overwhelming relief that she forgot propriety entirely. She rushed to him, helping him out of his dripping coat. "I was so worried," she said, her hands shaking. "You were gone so long." Nathan looked surprised by her concern but also pleased. "I am fine. Had to get the cattle away from a wash that was flooding. Miguel and Tomás have it under control now." He was shivering despite the warm air. Clara immediately set to work, stoking the fire, heating water, finding dry clothes. She made him sit by the fireplace while she prepared hot coffee and food. "You are spoiling me," Nathan said, but he accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "You are catching a chill. Someone needs to care for you properly." "Clara, I have lived on my own for years. I know how to care for myself." "That may be true, but you do not have to anymore." The words came out more intensely than she intended. Clara busied herself with the stove, not looking at him. She heard him stand, heard him approach. His hand touched her shoulder gently, turning her to face him. "I am starting to realize that," he said softly. They stood there, so close Clara could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the water droplets clinging to his hair. His eyes searched her face, and she saw her own growing feelings reflected back at her. "This is complicated," Clara whispered. "It does not have to be," Nathan replied. "Clara, I know this started as an employment arrangement. I know I am supposed to be just your employer, but I cannot pretend anymore that I see you only as my housekeeper." Clara's breath caught. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Whatever you decide about staying or leaving, I will respect it, but I hope you will stay. Not because I need a housekeeper, but because I have come to care for you. More than I should, perhaps, but there it is." Clara's heart was racing. Everything in her practical mind said this was too fast, too risky. But her heart, her traitorous heart, was singing. "I care for you too," she heard herself admit. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep this professional, but I cannot help it." Nathan's face broke into a smile that transformed him from merely pleasant-looking to genuinely handsome. "Really? Really?" Clara confirmed. And then she was laughing, and he was laughing, and the tension that had been building between them for 2 weeks dissolved into something warm and hopeful. Nathan took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Clara Preston, would you allow me to court you properly? We live in the same house," Clara pointed out. "How exactly do you propose to court me properly? I will figure something out. But I want to do this right. You deserve to be courted, to be treasured, not simply to become attached to me out of convenience or gratitude." "You think I care for you out of gratitude?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "You not?" "Nathan, if gratitude were enough, I would have fallen for the station master who felt sorry for me, or Mrs. Wells who was kind, or any number of people who have shown me small kindnesses. I care for you because of who you are, because you are honest and hardworking and kind, because you listen when I talk, because you make me laugh, because I feel more myself with you than I have felt in years." Nathan's eyes darkened with emotion. For a moment, Clara thought he might kiss her, and she wanted him to, propriety be damned. But he stepped back, maintaining the respectful distance that characterized all their interactions. "I am going to change into dry clothes before I actually do catch a chill," he said, his voice slightly rough. "But Clara, this conversation is not over, not by a long measure." After he disappeared into his room, Clara leaned against the counter, her heart still racing. What had she done? She had admitted her feelings for a man she had known for only 2 weeks. She was living in his house, dependent on him for everything. Every sensible part of her said this was a terrible idea, but for once, Clara did not want to be sensible. She wanted to trust what she felt, to believe that sometimes good things happened even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. Over the following days, Nathan made good on his promise to court her properly. He brought her wildflowers from the range, their bright colors a stark contrast to the red earth. He asked Miguel to take over evening chores so he could spend more time with Clara after supper. They took walks in the evening, Nathan pointing out constellations and telling her stories about the land. He was unfailingly respectful, never pressing for more than she was comfortable giving, but the attraction between them grew stronger. Clara found herself hyper-aware of his presence, of every accidental touch, every moment their eyes met across the room. The ladies' social was a welcome distraction. Miguel drove Clara to town, and she spent a pleasant afternoon with Mrs. Wells and half a dozen other women, learning about life in the territory and sharing her own story carefully edited to leave out the more painful details of her brother's betrayal. The women welcomed her warmly, and several mentioned how good it was to see Nathan settling down with a proper lady. Clara tried to explain that she was just his housekeeper, but the knowing looks the women exchanged suggested they saw right through that claim. "Nathan Vaughn has been the most eligible bachelor in the territory for 5 years," Mrs. Wells said with a twinkle in her eye. "Every unmarried woman and half the married ones have tried to catch his interest. If he is looking at you the way people say he is, you hold on to that man. He is one of the good ones." Clara could not help smiling. "He is he not? The very best," Mrs. Wells confirmed. When Miguel drove her back to the ranch that evening, Clara felt lighter than she had in months. She had friends, work she enjoyed, and a man who cared for her. Life felt full of possibility. Nathan was waiting on the porch when she arrived. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist just a moment longer than necessary. "Did you enjoy yourself?" he asked. "Very much. The women were wonderful." Clara hesitated, then added, "They all seem to think you and I are courting. We are courting." "I know, but they thought it before we even admitted it to each other. Apparently we were not as subtle as we believed." Nathan grinned. "I was never trying to be subtle. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you sitting on that station platform, looking lost and fierce all at once." "You did not," Clara protested, but she was smiling. "I did. I told myself I was just helping someone in need, but the truth is, I could not bear the thought of you being in trouble. And then, when you insisted on working instead of accepting charity, when you stood up to me and demanded to earn your own way, I was lost." They stood on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nathan took Clara's hand, interlacing their fingers. "It has been nearly 3 weeks," he said. "Your month is almost up. Have you thought about what you want to do?" Clara had thought about little else. "I want to stay," she admitted, "if you still want me to." "I will always want you to," Nathan said. Then more seriously, "But Clara, I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking you to stay as just my housekeeper. I am asking you to stay as the woman I am courting, the woman I hope someday to marry. If that is not what you want, it is what I want," Clara interrupted. "Nathan, I know it is fast. I know people will say we barely know each other, but I feel more certain about this about you than I have felt about anything in a very long time." Then stay. Not for a month, not for a year, but for always. Marry me, Clara. Clara's breath caught. That is not a courtship. That is a proposal. I know. I am doing this all backwards, but I have never been good at waiting for things I know are right. Nathan took both her hands now, looking directly into her eyes. I love you, Clara Preston. I think I have loved you since you refused my ticket and demanded to work instead. Marry me. Build a life with me here. Let me spend every day proving that you made the right choice. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now, but they were happy tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Nathan let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. I am going to kiss you now, he said. If that is acceptable. It is more than acceptable, Clara replied. His kiss was gentle at first, respectful and tender. But when Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside, it deepened into something more passionate, more promising. It was a kiss that spoke of longing and belonging, of finding home in another person. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to marry you properly in the church in town with witnesses. I want everyone to know you are choosing me, that you are mine and I am yours. Then that is what we will do, Clara agreed. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Moab. Mrs. Wells helped Clara make a proper wedding dress from cream-colored silk that Nathan insisted on buying despite Clara's protests about the expense. The dress was simple but beautiful, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Miguel and Tomás stood up for Nathan, while Mrs. Wells and several of the other ladies from the social stood with Clara. The church was full despite the short notice, the community turning out to celebrate with the couple who had found each other in such an unlikely way. Clara had never seen Nathan in a proper suit before. He looked uncomfortable in the formal clothes, but impossibly handsome, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the short aisle. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. When Nathan pledged his life and love to Clara, his voice was strong and certain. When Clara made the same pledge, she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This man, this life, this harsh, beautiful land, it was all hers now. You may kiss your bride, the preacher said, and Nathan did not hesitate, pulling Clara into his arms and kissing her thoroughly enough that several people in the congregation chuckled. The celebration afterward was held at the general store, with tables set up outside laden with food the community had provided. There was music and dancing, and Clara found herself passed from partner to partner, as the men of Moab took turns dancing with the new bride. But it was when Nathan reclaimed her for a waltz that Clara felt truly complete. They moved together as if they had been dancing together for years, his hand firm at her waist, her hand secure in his. Happy, Mrs. Vaughn? Nathan asked, his voice low and intimate despite the crowd around them. Happier than I ever imagined I could be, Clara replied honestly. Even though a few months ago you were being abandoned at a train station, especially because of that. If my brother had not abandoned me, I never would have met you. I would have gone back to St. Louis and resumed my small, safe life, never knowing what I was missing. Then I suppose I should thank him, Nathan said, though his tone suggested he would do no such thing. Perhaps I should. He thought he was leaving me to ruin, but instead he led me to you, to this life, to happiness I did not know existed. That night, Nathan carried Clara over the threshold of the house that was now truly theirs. It looked different than it had 2 months ago, transformed from a bachelor's neglected dwelling to a proper home. Clara's touches were everywhere, From the curtains in the windows to the flowers on the table to the organized efficiency of every room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vaughn," Nathan said, setting her down gently. "I have been home for months," Clara replied, "but now it is official." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a revelation of love and desire that left them both breathless and amazed. Clara had heard whispers about what happened between husband and wife, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of Nathan's gentle, thorough loving, for the way he made her feel cherished and desired all at once. Afterward, lying in Nathan's arms in the bed they now shared, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Every hard thing she had endured, her parents' death, her brother's betrayal, being left alone at that station, had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I was wrong earlier," Clara said. "I do not need to thank my brother, but I am grateful for everything that brought me here, even the painful parts. They led me home." Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Vaughn. No going back to Missouri, no second thoughts." "No second thoughts," Clara promised. "This is where I belong." The first year of their marriage was one of hard work and deep happiness. Clara threw herself into making the ranch run efficiently, managing the household accounts, and discovering she had a gift for business strategy. She suggested several improvements that increased their profits, including breeding better quality horses to sell to the Army and working with Miguel to improve their irrigation system. She also discovered she loved ranch life. The physical work was satisfying, the stark beauty of the landscape grew on her, and the sense of building something lasting with Nathan filled her with purpose. Nathan was a wonderful husband, attentive, affectionate, and consistently respectful of Clara's intelligence and capabilities. He valued her opinions, sought her advice on ranch decisions, and never made her feel less than his full partner in their life together. Their physical relationship deepened as they learned each other's desires and preferences. Nathan was an inventive and generous lover, and Clara discovered a passionate side of herself she had never suspected existed. Their bedroom became a place of laughter and pleasure, of whispered endearments and satisfied sighs. In the spring, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan over supper one evening, simply stating the fact and watching his face transform with joy. "Truly," he asked, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair, "we are going to have a baby." "Yes," Clara confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "In about 6 months, I believe." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am going to be a father. Clara, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, amazed, grateful, I am all of those things. But most of all, I am in awe of you, of the family we are building. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Clara struggled with morning sickness in the early months. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, trying to keep her from doing any heavy work. Clara had to firmly remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile, and could still manage her responsibilities. Mrs. Wells and the other women in town rallied around Clara, sharing advice and providing support. Clara was touched by how thoroughly the community had accepted her, how she had gone from being a stranger abandoned at the station to being one of them. In November of 1879, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Wells, who had experience with midwifery. Nathan paced outside the bedroom, forbidden to enter by Mrs. Wells, who declared that husbands were useless during childbirth and only got in the way. When Mrs. Wells finally opened the door and announced he had a son, Nathan practically burst into the room. He found Clara exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," Clara said softly. Nathan approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. To Nathan, he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen besides Clara herself. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are perfect. Clara, thank you. Thank you for this, for him, for everything." They named him Noah Vincent Vaughn, and he was doted on by everyone on the ranch. Miguel and Tomás treated him like family, making him toys and competing to be his favorite. The community embraced him, bringing gifts and offering congratulations. Clara discovered that motherhood suited her. She loved the weight of Noah in her arms, the sweet smell of him, the way he looked at her with absolute trust. She managed to balance caring for him with her work on the ranch, often strapping him to her back as she worked in the garden or going over accounts with him sleeping nearby. Nathan was an involved father, refusing to be one of those men who considered childcare women's work. He changed diapers, walked the floor with Noah when he was fussy, and sang him terrible lullabies that nonetheless seemed to soothe the baby. Watching her husband with their son made Clara fall in love with him all over again. 2 years later, Clara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Nora Grace. She had Clara's coloring and Nathan's eyes, and she was a calm, easy baby compared to her brother's more demanding temperament. With 2 children, the house felt truly complete. Laughter and noise filled the rooms that had once been silent and neglected. Clara often thought about that day at the station, about how alone and hopeless she had felt. If someone had told her then that in just a few years she would be happily married with 2 children and a life she loved, she never would have believed them. The ranch continued to prosper. Nathan's careful management and Clara's business acumen made them one of the more successful operations in the area. They were able to expand their holdings, purchase better breeding stock, and improve their facilities. When Noah was 4 and Nora was 2, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. She was tired more easily and suffered from persistent back pain. Nathan urged her to rest more, and Clara reluctantly agreed, allowing him to hire additional help for the house and garden. Their third child, a son they named Nathan Jr., but called Junior, was born in the spring of 1884. He was a large, healthy baby with powerful lungs that he used frequently, especially at night. "I do not remember the other 2 being this loud," Nathan said blearily one night after walking Junior for an hour trying to soothe him. "Noah was actually worse," Clara reminded him, taking the baby and settling into the rocking chair to nurse him. "You just do not remember because you were sleeping through it." "I was not," Nathan protested, but he was smiling. Even exhausted and frazzled, they were happy. As the children grew, the ranch became their playground and classroom. Clara homeschooled them, using her teaching skills to ensure they could read, write, and cipher. Nathan taught them about ranching, about the land, about hard work and integrity. Noah grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and wanted to be just like his father. Nora was more spirited, with a love of adventure that kept Clara constantly worried. Junior was still too young to show his true nature, but he seemed to be sunny and affectionate, generous with his smiles and cuddles. 5 years after Junior's birth, Clara had their 4th and final child, another daughter they named Grace Catherine, after Nathan's mother and Mrs. Wells, who had become like a mother to Clara. Grace was a quiet, observant baby who seemed to take in everything with her wide, thoughtful eyes. By 1890, more than a decade after that fateful day at the station, Clara was a completely different person than the scared, abandoned woman Nathan had found. She was confident, capable, beloved by her family and respected in the community. She managed a successful ranch alongside her husband, raised 4 wonderful children, and had built a life richer than any she had dared imagine. One evening, after getting the children to bed, Clara and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Nathan's arm was around Clara's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Staying here instead of going back east?" Clara lifted her head to look at him. "Not for one single moment. Why would you ask that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy, that this life is enough for you." "Enough? Nathan, this life is everything." Clara took his hand, interlacing their fingers. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met? You said sometimes quick changes lead to better places than where we were headed." "I remember. You were right. If I had gotten on that train to Denver, I would have found work maybe, or struggled and failed. Either way, I would have been alone. Instead, I found you. I found home. I found a love deeper than I knew existed. This life we have built, our children, our ranch, our partnership, it is more than enough. It is everything I never knew I wanted." Nathan pulled her close, kissing her with the familiar passion that had never dimmed in their years together. "I love you, Clara Vaughn. Thank you for taking a chance on a dusty cowboy at a train station. Thank you for being the kind of man who would buy a stranger a train ticket and change both our lives," Clara replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, Clara could hear one of the children stirring, probably Nora, who had a habit of waking from dreams. She should go check, but for just this moment, Clara let herself simply be a woman who was loved, who loved in return, who had found her place in the world against all odds. The years continued to pass in a happy blur. Noah grew into a young man who was the image of his father, tall and capable and deeply committed to the ranch. At 19, he was already managing much of the day-to-day operations, showing a gift for ranching that made Nathan proud. Nora, at 17, was as spirited as ever, with a mind for business that rivaled Clara's. She kept the books now, managed inventory, and negotiated deals with buyers that left them better off than before. Clara knew Nora would not stay on the ranch forever. She had too much ambition, too much desire to see the world, but for now, she was an invaluable part of their operation. Junior, at 15, was the charmer of the family, able to talk his way into or out of anything. He had a way with horses that was almost magical, and already people from neighboring ranches were bringing their difficult horses to him for training. Grace, at 10, was still finding her way, but Clara could see her daughter's gift for teaching emerging. Grace was patient with the younger children in town, often helping them with reading and arithmetic. The ranch had expanded significantly over the years. They now ran several hundred head of cattle, had established a reputation for quality horses, and owned nearly 1,000 acres. They employed a dozen ranch hands year-round, and the operation was one of the most successful in the territory. But success had not changed Nathan and Clara's fundamental relationship. They were still partners in every sense, still deeply in love, still best friends who enjoyed each other's company above all others. As Utah moved toward statehood in the mid-1890s, Clara and Nathan found themselves involved in local politics and community leadership. Clara helped establish a proper school in Moab. Serving on the school board and ensuring quality education was available to all children in the area. Nathan served on various committees, his reputation for fairness and integrity making him a natural leader. On their 20th anniversary in 1899, their children organized a celebration. The entire community turned out for a party at the ranch, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory. As Clara danced with Nathan under the stars, surrounded by their children, their friends, and the community they had helped build, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 20 years, Nathan said, echoing her thoughts. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. The best 20 years of my life, Clara said. Mine too. Nathan pulled her closer. You know what I think about sometimes? That moment at the station when you refused my ticket. What if you had just taken it and left? What if you had gone to Denver? But I did not. I stayed. We found each other. We did. And every day since has been a gift. They continued dancing as their children watched with indulgent smiles. Noah had his arm around his sweetheart, a nice girl from a neighboring ranch. Nora was arguing good-naturedly with one of the young ranch hands about something, her eyes sparkling. Junior was showing off his rope tricks to a group of impressed youngsters. Grace was dancing with her best friend, both of them giggling. This, Clara thought, is what happiness looks like. Not the absence of hardship. They had faced plenty of challenges over the years, from droughts to difficult winters to the inevitable struggles of raising children and running a business. But happiness, despite those challenges, happiness built on love and partnership and shared purpose. As the party wound down and their guests departed, the family gathered on the porch. The children shared stories and laughter, teasing each other with the easy affection of siblings who genuinely liked each other. Tell us the story again, Grace demanded, about how you met. It was a story the children never tired of hearing, though they must have heard it 100 times. Your mother was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, Nathan began, as he always did. I was dusty, tired, and heartbroken, Clara corrected, as she always did. You were fierce and proud and determined, Nathan continued. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to help you, though I did not yet know I would fall in love with you. And Mama refused the ticket, Nora added, knowing the story by heart. She insisted on working for it, Nathan confirmed. Which is how I knew she was special. Most people would have just taken the help and left. Your mother demanded to earn her own way. And then you fell in love, Grace asked, even though she knew the answer. And then we fell in love, Clara confirmed. It was fast and unexpected and absolutely right. Your father courted me with wildflowers and stargazing, and 3 weeks after I arrived he proposed. 3 weeks, Junior shook his head. That is crazy. It was, Nathan agreed, but I have never regretted it for one moment. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Clara corrected with a smile. The best decision was buying that train ticket in the first place. The children groaned at the familiar exchange, but they were smiling. Eventually, they drifted off to their rooms, leaving Nathan and Clara alone on the porch once again. You think they understand how lucky we are? Clara asked quietly. I think they will someday, when they are older and have lived more. Right now, this is just normal to them, a mother and father who love each other, a home that is stable and happy. They do not know yet how rare that really is. We should make sure they know they are loved, that they are wanted, that home is always here for them, Clara said fiercely. No child of mine will ever feel abandoned or unwanted. Nathan heard the old pain in her voice, the echo of that day at the station. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. They know, Clara. Look at them, confident, happy, secure. That is because of you, because of the home you have made, the love you give so freely. You have made certain they will never feel what you felt that day. Clara relaxed into his embrace. He was right. Her children were nothing like she had been. They had never known real hardship, never been made to feel unwanted or burdensome. She and Nathan had built something better, something lasting. As they grew older, Nathan's hair turned silver, and Clara found laugh lines deepening around her eyes. But they were happy lines, earned through decades of joy and laughter. Their bodies showed the wear of hard work and the passage of time, but they were still strong, still vital. Noah married his sweetheart in 1902, bringing a daughter-in-law into the family who Clara adored. They settled in the house Miguel had once occupied. Miguel had retired comfortably years earlier with enough money to live out his days in peace, thanks to Nathan's generosity. 2 years later, Noah and his wife presented Nathan and Clara with their first grandchild, a robust boy they named Samuel. Holding her grandson for the first time, Clara felt the circle of her life complete itself. She had been abandoned and alone, and now she was surrounded by family children, a daughter-in-law, a grandchild, and the husband she loved more with each passing year. Nora left the ranch in 1903 to attend business college in Denver, the first step toward the larger life Clara had always known she would seek. But she came home regularly, and her letters were full of excitement and ambition. Clara was proud of her daughter's courage, even as she missed her. Junior took over the horse training operation entirely, expanding it until they were known throughout the territory, now the state of Utah, having achieved statehood in 1896 for producing the finest working horses available. Grace discovered her calling as a teacher, taking over the school Clara had helped establish years before. She had a gift for reaching even the most difficult students, and parents praised her patience and skill. In 1910, on a warm spring day much like the one when they had first met, Nathan and Clara celebrated their 31st anniversary. They were in their 50s now, still working the ranch but allowing their children to take on more of the daily burden. They rode out to a favorite spot on their land, a rise that overlooked the Colorado River and provided a view of the dramatic landscape they had called home for 3 decades. 31 years, Clara marveled. Sometimes it feels impossible that it has been so long. Best 31 years of my life, Nathan said, dismounting and helping Clara down. They spread a blanket and sat, leaning against each other as they had done countless times over the years. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Clara asked. "You said sometimes quick changes lead to better places than where we were headed." "I was talking about you missing your train to Denver," Nathan recalled. "You were right in ways you could not have imagined. That change being left at the station, meeting you, staying here, it led me to the best place, to everything I have now." Nathan took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding ring he had placed there so many years ago. "I bought your passage that day, thinking I was just helping someone in need. Instead, I bought my future. I just did not know it yet." "We bought each other's future," Clara corrected. "I gave you something too, a home instead of just a house, a family, a partnership." "You gave me everything," Nathan said simply. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the river flow below and the clouds drift overhead. There was peace in this place, in this life they had built together from almost nothing. "I need to tell you something," Clara said eventually, "something I have never properly said." "What is that?" "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me that day, for caring about a stranger, for giving me a chance to build a life. Thank you for loving me, for being a true partner, for giving me children and a home and more happiness than I ever imagined possible." Clara's voice wavered with emotion. "You saved me, Nathan, in every way a person can be saved." Nathan's own eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You saved me too. I had land and cattle and a house, but I did not have a life, not really. You gave me that. You gave me purpose and joy and love. Everything good in my life traces back to that day at the station." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 3 decades of love and partnership and shared joy. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together countless times, Nathan and Clara rode back to the ranch house. It was no longer the neglected bachelor dwelling it had been when Clara first arrived. Now it was a proper home, expanded and improved over the years, filled with the memories of a life well lived. Their children and grandchildren, there were 3 now, with another on the way, would gather soon for supper. There would be noise and laughter, stories and teasing, the comfortable chaos of family. But for just a moment, as they approached the house, Clara looked at Nathan and remembered that dusty cowboy who had offered her a train ticket and inadvertently offered her everything. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as the first time she had spoken them. "I love you too," Nathan replied. "Yesterday, today, tomorrow, always." They rode into the yard together, side by side, partners in every way, ready for whatever years remained. Behind them, the sun set over the red rocks and the river, over the land they had tamed together, over the legacy they had built. Clara had been left at a station with no ticket, no money, and no hope. A passing cowboy had bought her passage, not knowing he was also buying his future, their future together. And what a future it had been. The years continued to unfold with gentle grace. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with youthful energy and reminding Nathan and Clara of the early days with their own children. They slowed down somewhat, allowing the next generation to take over the most demanding work, but they remained active and involved. Nathan still rode out most days to check on the cattle and horses, and Clara still managed the household accounts and maintained her garden. They took pleasure in simpler things now: quiet mornings on the porch, evening walks by the river, time with grandchildren, and most of all, time with each other. On a crisp October morning in 1920, 41 years after that fateful day at the station, Nathan and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunrise. They were in their 60s now, their hair completely silver, their faces lined with age, but their love as strong as ever. "Did you ever imagine we would make it this far?" Clara asked, her hand in Nathan's as it had been countless times over the decades. "I hoped," Nathan replied, "but I never took a single day for granted." "Good," Clara said, "neither did I." They sat in peaceful silence as their family began to stir inside. Noah's wife was making breakfast, the smell of coffee and bacon wafting through the door. Grandchildren's voices rose in cheerful argument about something insignificant. It was the sound of family, of continuity, of love passing from one generation to the next. "We did well," Nathan observed. "Look at what we built." Clara looked out over the ranch that had been her home for more than 4 decades. The original house had been expanded twice, with additional buildings added to accommodate their growing family. The land stretched as far as she could see, productive and well managed. Most importantly, it was filled with children, grandchildren, and the promise of great-grandchildren to come. "We did very well indeed," Clara agreed. As the sun climbed higher, painting the red rocks in shades of copper and gold, Clara thought about that lost, frightened girl who had been abandoned at a train station so many years ago. She thought about the cowboy who had offered unexpected kindness, who had seen something in her worth saving. From that single moment of compassion, from that one decision to help a stranger, an entire life had bloomed. A partnership, a family, a legacy that would extend far beyond their own years. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked, as if reading her thoughts. Clara thought about the question seriously. She had lost her parents young, been betrayed by her brother, and spent one terrible day thinking she was completely alone in the world. But all of that had led her here, to this man, to this life. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every joy and every sorrow led me exactly where I needed to be. Nathan lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. Then we lived right, and they had. They truly had. Inside the house, their family called for them to come to breakfast. Nathan stood, helping Clara to her feet, and hand in hand they walked inside to join the people who were their greatest accomplishment. The abandoned girl and the kind cowboy had found each other against all odds, built a love that lasted decades, and created a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations to come. It was a story worth telling, a life worth living, a love worth everything. And as Clara took her place at the head of the table, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, with Nathan at her side where he had been for 41 years, she knew without doubt that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been left at the station with no ticket. A passing cowboy had bought her passage, and together they had bought their future, a future filled with more love, more joy, and more blessings than either of them could have imagined on that dusty platform in 1878. It was, Clara thought as she smiled at her husband across the table, a very good future indeed.